I have a 2010 Honda Odyssey EX, and the brakes on the front rotors are a little warped. So the steering wheel is vibrating, and I'm going to replace the rotors. I had replaced the brake pads before, so I'm going to put the same brake pads as this one. These are pretty new, replaced last year. The rotors or need a replacement. I was holding up until the brakes were pulsating, but now they are, so I'm going to replace it. To remove the rotor, you have to first remove the caliper, and the caliper is held by these bolts, one on the top and there is one on the bottom. And once you take that off, the caliper will come off and it will be hanging by this rubber hose or rubber pipe that feeds the brake fluid in there. So you have to be careful, and I have one of the jack stands too, so that I can put it over there. So first remove these two bolts and then remove the caliper. Once I remove the caliper, the brake pads can be removed, and then we'll remove the bracket. The bracket is held by two bolts, one over here and one in the bottom. To remove these bolts, you need a 14mm socket. So I have a 14mm socket right there, and it will you put it in there, and if it's very tight, then I have loosened it. You can put a wrench over here and hold it this way. So this is the this one also is the one that is tightened up there, but in my case it just came off here. And once you remove the caliper pin, this is the caliper pin, and actually the caliper bolt here, and the bottom one also is going to be out. Then you can remove the caliper here. It will be a little difficult. I will put a screwdriver to release the brake pads and give it a push the pistons. So you can see there are two pistons here, and the pistons are holding the caliper way inside, so you won't be able to open it. It will be a little difficult, but if I use a screwdriver, it will be easier. I've taken a screwdriver, and what I'm going to do is release the caliper a little bit. So that it releases the there you go. So this side and this side, and this one you have to be careful to not let it fall on its own. You have to rest it on something that will hold it. So I'm going to, and make sure that this is not twisted, and the way it goes, it should go back in after you're done removing the and replacing the rotor. So I have the brake pads here, and this will slide out. So these brake pads are pretty new, put in last year. so I'm going to reuse them. And same thing for the brake pad here. If you are changing with new brake pads, you can discard those old ones. And I'll leave this the caliper pins in there. I can put some grease later on, but if they are rotating, if they are moving freely, it's good. And I'm going to remove these two bolts now. So those two bolts will require a 19 millimeter, and I have a breaker bar, so in case it gives me trouble. So it probably will, I need a little force to break this open or loose, and once I am done I will show you how to remove this caliper bracket. Honda Rotors come with these two screws that are often difficult to remove, and they're actually not needed. They put it on while they are building the car so that the rotors don't fall off, but I'm going to remove that. So what I have is a driver with a hex bit, and I'm going to, you have to hold it very tight. There you go. This one came off, not bad. So this is an impact driver. So if you have an impact driver, that will help. If you try with your hand, it's going to be difficult. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to discard these or keep it in my tool chest. So I'm not going to put it back on. This should stay without these screws in there. These two bolts holding the caliper bracket is very tight. I tried with the breaker, and I have a big socket, the 1/2 inch socket with a breaker, and I was unable to take it off. So I'm going to use an impact wrench, and this is a Craftsman impact wrench, which is electric. You don't need a big tank of air to power it, and it can it's pretty powerful. So I'm going to try that and take that off, those two bolts off. So it was a little difficult to put this the impact wrench in there because it will get stuck on the other side, so you have to be careful not to damage the oil filter or so. So I used a smaller socket in there, and I was able to release the two bolts. So once you remove the two bolts, the caliper bracket will just come off. So you can put away the caliper bracket, and here comes the older rotor. So I'll clean this up a little bit with a wire brush and put the new rotor in, put the calipers back in. I'm using a wire brush to just take off some of these. I can also put some, I'll use some brake cleaner a little bit so that it's these get rusted over time, but it's not too bad. The new caliper goes, this is actually labeled for the right wheel. So if you look at it, it should move this way, and so these should be, and these holes will be pointing towards the back when the wheel rotates. So this is going to be the right one, and this is going to be the left one. They also marked it with R and L. So I'm going to put this on and put the caliper back on. So this one goes right there. It fits in there, and then the bracket, once I put the caliper bracket, it will hold it and it shouldn't come off. I'm not going to put the 2 screws for this one. So I tightened the caliper bracket bolts, the 2 bolts, and now I'm going to put the brake pads. So this was in the front, and it should slide in. And this one has the wear indicator. This one will screech if it gets low, so you can see if the brake pad wears out up to this starts screeching. So this goes in the back, so you put it in the same way and squeeze in the brackets. I have to use both hands, but you can see how it goes in. So the brake pads are seated. You can see they have got in the grooves. So I was able to squeeze in the caliper without need for a C-clamp, and I'm going to put the 2 bolts back in, which will hold the caliper. And one goes here, and I'll tighten those, and it should be all ready to go. Put the wheel on, should be done.